Sup guys, today's video is about patches in games, specifically focusing on Rivals 2, Ultimate, and because I was gonna make this video about Rivals 2, right? And about a month later thinking about the big patch, and then the follow-up patch afterwards, and then I was like thinking, I'm like, spoilers, I didn't like the Rivals 2 patch in retrospect, and I'm thinking, what makes a good patch and what makes a bad patch? In my opinion, of course. So, yeah, with that said, elephant in the room, Rivals 2, right? Inspiration for this. And now, Rivals 2, first of all, very new game, right? Just came out of the beta, like, a couple months ago at this point. And so, I kind of also make this with that context in mind of, as a player, like, my thoughts on patches, for that game. So, the first major patch came out like a month ago, and it was focused on fun. It was not meant to be a balanced patch, but a let's make the patch feel better to play for the players type thing. Less degenerate strategies, all that stuff. And now, I want to focus on things I actually liked about that. I do like that philosophy of making it fun. Although, fun is a weird word because it's so subjective, right? Like, what one person finds really fun, another person might not find fun. Granted, I think most people can agree, more interactive game play is better. And if it's going to be a fun patch, it should be focused on making people fight each other more and reducing the ability for characters to camp. Cool. And one thing I really liked about the Rivals 2 patch for that reason was changes the universal mechanics, right? If you're going for more fun stuff, make the game just feel better to play, universal mechanics is a great way to go about that stuff, even though it can be really bad if it's done wrong. I think changing universal mechanics is one of those things that, like, if you do it well, like, I think the shield changes overall are pretty good. Parry changes are really good, right? Like, lots of good changes overall. And it's nice that if the patches are meant to be focused on balance, it affects everyone. Not necessarily equally, right? But you get out of the way, you figure out what's strong, what's weak with these new universal mechanics, and go from there. And I think the earlier you make these massive changes to the mechanics, it'd be better. Now with that said, this patch also just had a lot of nerfs. Now, power level in Rivals 2 is way too high. I think, like, characters that I would consider very strong in a vacuum, like Loxodon, were very weak because of, like, oh, they're strong in a vacuum, and then these characters are just unbelievably broken. Like, Crag, Rano, just a lot of people said Arcane, unbelievably broken. And this creates an issue, right, where, you have to nerf a lot of these characters. And I think any patch with nerfs is going to feel bad for the people playing these characters and good for everyone who has to fight them, right? So, now the difficulty with nerfs is the benefit of the nerfs for people not playing the character and having to fight it is worse than for the people who want to keep playing that character because they're constantly getting that negative feedback. It's very difficult to do nerfs correctly. And I think one of the most difficult things to do with nerfs is utility nerfs. I think nerfing like numbers is very easy. When I say numbers, I mean like, oh, we made this smash attack kill a little bit later, right? Or this character dies a little bit earlier, or this move is slightly worse on block, right? Nerfs that don't really change the usefulness of a move, but just tune it. And I think those are generally safer nerfs to go for, because they don't really affect the character feel, right? Like, I don't care if my move kills 5 to 10% later. If it kills like 40% later, I'm gonna notice that, right? But it's gonna keep my character intact. Now, utility nerfs is where it's really, I think, very difficult to do. Like, if you nerf something's frame data, I mean like nerf it. I don't mean like, oh, this move is 1 frame worse on landing, like, whatever, it's basically a numbers nerf. But like, oh, this move is like 10 frames more startup, or 10 frames more lag. It's just gonna make it feel so much worse. Like, even if a move is objectively good, I think it's really, really hard to convey that to players who go, oh my god, this move used to feel so nice, and now it feels awful, right? Same with movement, especially. If you nerf your character's movement, they might objectively have good movement, but like, let's say they're a little bit slower in the air, it might be like, oh my god, I used to float, I'm fleet, right? I used to float on really fast, and then they nerfed my float speed, and now I float on really slow, and I still float, which is really strong, but it's just gonna feel so garbage compared to what I'm used to. It's gonna take a long time to get used to, and especially for feel, people pick characters based on feel. I think this is a general truth with, top players are gonna pick characters based on tier list generally. to a certain extent, right? Like I try to pick good characters, but I need it to be good and feel fun. But most people just pick a character that feels fun, right? And most people feel really bad if a character they thought was fun is no longer fun because of changes to them. So anything that nerfs their feel has to be done really carefully. And it's something that I really didn't like about the Rivals 2 patch. Not just because of Arcane, but seeing Fleet players are really unhappy with the character because they nerfed the feel of the character a lot. And then utility is a very similar thing, right? Where you give characters tools, and people play characters for tools. Obviously, I'm very biased because I play Arcane here, right? And I'm gonna say right now, I have not played Rivals 2 since like the first day of the new patch. I tried Arcane out. I was like, I really don't like how this character feels, and I emphasize feels. I don't care if the character is probably the worst in the game. I was playing the character before where he was not doing the best in tournaments. I actually top 32'd one of the coin boxes before the nerfs. So I was doing pretty decent with him. And I can tell you he was a pretty good character. Honestly, a little bit underrepresented compared to how good he was. But I would argue not broken, not at least top 3 in a 10 character game. But yeah, I didn't really care about the tier. I was like, oh, whatever. Early game, we'll see what happens with balance. Maybe it'll be good, maybe it'll be bad. But and they just they took away so many tools, right? And that's the thing that really sucks. Like they made it so his projectile game was just not really that good. They kept his ability to fight with normals intact, right? Like he still is really good up close buttons. They took away the parts of Arcane that make a lot of people play him over, say, Zetter, right? Another character is very fast, very good normals. But the difference is Zetter's specials are meant to be like these really strong up-close combo pressure tools, whereas Arcane specials are let's keep people out or let's control space and control space so I can take it and get in. And it's really hard to want to play go back to playing the character when it's like, oh, the main mechanics of my character that are unique are gone, right? That's something that has been done very carefully. And something that generally I think should be kept for a beta. And I know Rivals 2 was rushed. I know they kind of released it a little bit early because it was a good time. So that kind of was in beta. But also, once you're charging for the full release of a game, you really want to keep those things there. And I feel like as a player, I want to play a game knowing my character is going to generally be the same character on launch until release. Like, okay, maybe 10 years down the line, the character's very different in a game, whatever. You're playing like League and they have full character revamps. But even then, that's something, and I'll talk about this more later, that's something that really needs to be done more slowly, I think, so players can get used to that. But yeah, and then kind of overall, my issue with the Rivals 2 patch as a player who I've never quit a game before because of a patch. I've never quit because, balance for the game, I don't like it, I don't like to do with my character. Never. Nor have I ever picked up a game because of what they've done to a character. Now, that's not saying I won't pick up a new character, or maybe duo main or something, if characters get changed. Ultimate's a great example. I'll talk about that later, where it's like, I started playing my Rosa because she got a lot of buffs, and Olimar got nerfed. But I still end up playing Rosa since the start of the game, Olimar since the start of the game, and I still play them, despite the balance changes. But yeah, so as a player, it gives me concern as well, where it's like, oh, I might like this character, and they might say, oh, we don't like how this character plays, even though we built the character with these tools in mind that enable this type of play. We play tested the character and all these things. We were confident with the character release. Okay, now we're going to completely gut the character. We're going to change them. We're going to bring them back later, right? It makes me feel like I could be investing time into a character. I played 140 hours of Rivals in 3 weeks on its release, right? And I feel like even when they bring back Arcane into the game, he's going to be very different than what I was playing. So I'm like, I don't want to commit time to a character knowing they might change a lot. Or, they might just roll back things, but I still feel like, oh, I didn't want to play the game for a month because my character was not the character I picked the game up for. And now I'm a month behind. So it gets really hard to commit knowing it could be... Grant, I don't expect future patches to be as insane, but, you never know now. Maybe they look at Zetter and they say, we're going to really destroy Zetter's shine pressure. And Zetter player is going to go, what the heck? Our character we picked up the game before is just not playable. Or, okay, exaggeration of course, but that's how it's going to feel. So, now let's move on to another game though, Ultimate. Because I think Ultimate is a good example of kind of like a good way, but also a bad way to do patches, right? I'm going to say right now, and keep in mind, Rivals is an early game, new, so I do understand. It's also a smaller team, indie game, all that stuff. I do understand it. But now, Rivals. I'm not Rivals. Ultimate. Ultimate, ended up being a game where there was more buffs than nerfs across the cast. Now, a big part of that was just the game generally had a lot of weak characters more than strong characters on release, which is weird to say. Like, if you picked up Ultimate, like, post-COVID, you would be like, wait, the power level used to be weak in this game? Yeah, a lot of characters felt really bad. Which I think is also, in retrospect, a good place to start. Because as long as the characters feel good, you can always tune them and give them more stuff later, which is nice. It feels like you're getting Christmas presents. Like, oh my god, patch time. Whoa, my character got a new tool. This is amazing. I think especially what they're smart about doing is, not only was there more buffs and nerfs, but the nerfs tended to be like just number nerfs. Like, okay, knockback for a move, a little less damage, or maybe moves a little bit less safe, but still a good pressure tool. Like, even character designs that are really bad, like Min. I'm not gonna hide it. I know Min is one of the worst designed characters in any game possible. So they took her and said, okay, her core is this really obnoxious full screen zone with constant pressure. We want to keep that core, but we want to nerf the things surrounding her that kind of cover up some of her weaknesses and enable things we don't like. So they said, okay, she can still pressure your shield, but we're going to make her shield pressure much worse instead of that. We're going to make her shield pressure much worse so she can't break shields easily. But she still can pressure shields safely. Oh, her neutral air, really good move for setting up combos and spacing. You know, we're going to keep it as a good spacing and like anti-air move, but we're going to nerf like the combo aspect and how safe it is. So you can't just mindlessly spam it when people get close to the zoner. But you see, like, this is all number changes, and every the Nair nerf in particular was pretty hard, like pretty harsh overall. But it still was just good enough that I never felt like it lost its main utility of a defensive, like, keep you out move. Now, even with buffs, they tended to be a lot of just kind of buffing. Hey, the move has more knockback, or has a slightly bigger hitbox or something. You know, nothing super crazy. But it also was nice because once again, you felt like your character never really changed. And they would occasionally give characters more utility on a move. I think for Bowser Jr., for example, there was a patch where they made his down tilt a kill move. And I think they also made like his forward throw a kill move. And it's like, oh, okay. Like, you know, it feels in line with the character and it gives them more options. So, once again, Christmas presents. I'm getting new things if I play these weaker characters. That just enhance what I'm already doing. And also what's very nice about Ultimate is that they had really incremental patches. You would have probably like, I don't know, like when they were patching the game, like one patch every like 3 to 4 months. You kind of could expect it. Because we were like Ultimate version like 13.0, we got 3 years of patches. So it ends up being about like once every quarter. Probably more patches early on when the game was new, of course. And they were generally really small. Like, you didn't have these crazy meta-changing patches. You kind of knew what to expect if people complain about a character too much. The devs would nerf something small with the character. If people think a character is bad, you can expect at some point the character gets some small buffs. Yeah, even like, you look at a character like Palutena, who got nerfed a lot since the start of Ultimate. They nerfed her a lot in small bits at a time, so you got used to. If you were a Palutena player, you got used to like, oh, they made my neutral air a little bit worse. Oh, they made my down throw back air worse. Yeah, they nerfed dash attack at some point, right? And so it's like over time, by only nerfing a small amount of things at a time, you really gave players time to get used to things, right? Like, I remember when the grab nerf came out. That was the last set of nerfs for her, and that was like, okay, we're gonna nerf the range in her to throw, after nerfing a lot of other small things, because this is clearly an issue. So they also tried to nerf numbers before they nerfed a more core identity to the character, which was really nice. So overall, it worked out pretty well. Where I feel like Palutena players, you know, some people dropped her. I ended up not playing her, but that was more so because playing Palutena online during COVID was just really bad. Light trapping with her felt really hard because she's very reactionary there. So again, kills felt really annoying to get. But that's a whole other conversation for another video, right? Now, with that said, I think the downside of this way to do patches is patches also didn't really change the game much overall. Like, I feel like, you know, I think the biggest exception is Pichu, where they super nerfed Pichu, and they honestly over nerfed Pichu as like a reactionary nerf, and then they had to rebuff Pichu later. Although I kind of like how when they rebuffed Pichu, they actually rebuffed Olimar, buffing his Pikmin management, where like Pikmin lineups were more consistent, easy to control, all that stuff. And I was like, oh, they acknowledged they went overboard, but they didn't just say, oh, we're going to give the stuff we gave them back before, or we're not going to give them the things we took away. We're going to partially give those things back, but we're also going to give him new things instead to readjust him in a more healthy way. I forgot to record this initially, so a little extra part recording about Ike. Because Ike, I think, was one of the really interesting characters when it came to patching Ultimate, in that he's probably the only character who they gave a full rework to in Ultimate out of 80-ish characters. They saw Ike, and they saw Ike was doing really well with neutral air. You know? And they could have just nerfed Ike neutral air and said, okay, this move's really strong and annoying and easy to use. Let's nerf this and just see what happens. But I really liked how they did that and said, oh, we know we're taking away a massively important tool for the character. Let's give him a lot. So in the same patch where they made Ike's really strong neutral air much worse, they made down tilt a better combo tool. They made dash attack a much better kill move. They made forward air have less end lag and more damage. They made up B kill better as well. And then they ended up buffing some other things later. But like in that one patch where they nerfed his core move, they said, okay, we're gonna give him a lot of different compensation to make it so if you're an Ike player, you don't feel like, oh, we just screwed you over. It's like, oh, it is a significantly different character, but we're giving you a lot of different things to mess around with. And that could have went really wrong, to be fair. But I think that's a really good way to go about it when you're doing such a strong nerf. Like, even if Ike was a better character, like significantly after that, I think people have at least said, oh, they adjusted a lot and gave him like a lot more substance, more nuanced. And honestly, also, I feel like a lot of people, even though Ike ended up being a worse character overall, which arguably could just be because of the near nerfs, but I think honestly it was more so DLC and general buff philosophy power creep. I feel like a lot of people overall would say Ike was a more interesting character that was more fun to play after the nerfs to him. Or I should say, yeah, I would say after he was overall nerfed, right? So that's a really important aspect as well that I think Ultimate, in Ike's case, did extremely effectively. Was better designed, more interesting, more fun, not as viable, but that's, especially in an 80 character game, that's fine. It happens. Hard to make everyone equally viable. But yeah, so overall the biggest issue of this kind of patch philosophy, I think, is the meta develops really slowly. Like, overall the patches didn't actually change that much at any single time. Like, obviously if you look at the characters people played year one compared to now, there's a pretty big difference. But honestly, a lot of characters that weren't good on day one still aren't good. A lot of characters that were really good day one are still pretty damn good. And I think honestly a bigger change to the game's meta was just DLC power creep. How a lot of, especially Fighters Pass 2, of course, like even Fighters Pass 1, a lot of the changes to the game are, oh, the DLC characters are being played. Oh, these characters are really good into the really commonly played DLC characters. That and the fact that the actual changes to mechanics, like, they didn't really do any changes to mechanics for Ultimate. Like, the only real changes was Shield, where Shield was really weak at first. Funny to say it now, because Shield is really strong in Ultimate, where it's really easy to shield poke. But also projectiles were really strong on Shield, they did a lot of shield damage, so they nerfed that across the board. Otherwise, outside of glitches and maybe like some small things I'm not thinking about, the game's engine has remained the same since day one. Which really never addressed core issues of the game, right? How strong defensive play was, for example. Like running, like I was saying, I was camp people since day one because I recognized day one, oh, running away from people, just kind of like waiting for approaches and forcing approaches, which is always going to be strong in any game. But I was like, oh, it's particularly strong in Ultimate. And nowadays, you have a meta with like Steve, Sonic being the best characters. Game Watchers running up, shielding up, being as shield, drifting away is hard to deal with. Characters like Joker spamming gun and getting Arsene is strong. Cloud charging limit. Like, a lot of very strong characters have these mechanics that are enabled by how hard it is to open someone up. So right, so that's kind of the good and the bad parts of Ultimate's balance changes. The game also, 3 years into the game, it still felt like it wasn't that balanced because they weren't that aggressive. And the game needed at least like 2 more patches, I'd say, like at least another year of patching the game to get into a more... And like, even when they announced, oh, this is the last patch for the game, I think everyone knew, oh man, this game needs like 1 or 2 more patches. Right, I think that was the biggest issue. But I think a lot of people, for the most part, we were always a little underwhelmed with the patches, but I don't think, and like, I can't speak for everyone, but I think for the most part, community was like, okay, at least the patches make sense. Like, you get weird things like, oh, they buffed Link's down tilt. But hey, they're buffing Link, Like, oh, they nerfed Mythra forward smash. Hey, at least they nerfed Mythra, right? Like, they all made sense. And we knew we could rely on really consistent patches that kept characters intact while also gradually making the gap between the best characters and the worst characters smaller. And I think one of the things I would criticize, though, for Ultimate patches is that for the characters they buffed, they didn't really give the characters enough, as I mentioned before. I think one of the very few exceptions actually is Rosalina, where Rosalina was a not good character, and then they basically overhauled her, fixed a lot of her issues, they buffed a lot of things, they changed mechanics, like her side B used to have Luma stay in place when she did in the air, and then made it so Luma falls with Rosa. And overall, that was a huge buff. Right? So, but like, that's an exception to what their normal methodology was. And I think when they did tend to give characters, like, more utility, they didn't really account for it as well. Like, when they buffed, and I say buff Sonic's up there, because it's technically a fix, where the hitbox didn't connect super well, but they overfixed it, and it became a rising aerial combo starter that was really safe, and honestly leads to a lot of what makes Sonic combo games so good now. Is up there so good. Or Cloud up B, they buffed the move so it had like less lag for its grab ledge, and now that up B is significantly better than you'd expect from a character's weakness is supposed to be recovery. So very different patch philosophies, and you could probably put like a different chart comparing these two games. And I would say, like, you can look at what Ultimate did and say overall it was pretty good patches, and here is why, even though there are some issues. So yeah, I think it's very interesting, right? Just the philosophy though of, I think extreme patches overall are worse for a game, right? And I think if you want to change a lot for a character, you should change a lot for them over the course of maybe like a year, half a year, right? Like 3 or 4 patches. Well, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Do you agree with kind of these conclusions on different patches? Do you disagree? Like, if you were to make a game and you had to develop a patch philosophy, are you going for extremely aggressive patches that, like, try to deal with problems quickly, if not heavy-handedly, but like you address them? Or do you rather the problems kind of fester and change the game much slower so at least people can adjust to it? Yeah, guys, hope this was an interesting video. Catch you later.